Right, welcome everybody. Might as well get started. I have to apologise. My colleague Stephen Castry was going to be the facilitator of this discussion, but unfortunately he's stuck in South Africa somewhere and doesn't have signal, so I've stepped in at the last second, so I can only apologise, as Stephen was very much involved on the ground from the word get-go. But it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. It's nice to see people kind of coming on and trying to find a little bit about the Bermuda Seagrass project. So if people turn up late, they can always access I'm sure the video webinar at some later stage, but we might as well get started and see where we go from there. So Kat, if you can move the slides on. Perfect. So a little bit about ourselves. So my name's Justin Branson. I'm one of the directors at ClimateWise, and this is a real opportunity for us to talk about working in a holistic partnership. And to give you a bit of a history of ourselves, we are an organisation that looks to support individuals, businesses, society in general to come up with solutions to help counteract the climate change problem that we're facing in the world today. So what we do is we aggregate money, bring that money together and actually put that money towards projects to get new projects up and off the ground. And we can support individuals by getting them to understand what their footprint might be, help them educationally through understanding the choices they make and the impact those choices have. We also support businesses in terms of being able to calculate their GHG footprint and then develop solutions to reduce that footprint. And then what they can't reduce, we look to offset. And again, the money that we raise through that sort of funding allows us to go out into the world and actually plow money into new projects that looks to, as I said before, reduce the carbon input into the atmosphere and support local communities on the ground at a local scale. So today, we're going to look at one of these small projects that we've been involved with from the beginning, which is the Bermuda Seagrass Restoration Project. And we're just going to go very, very quickly through the summary, what the issue was with the Seagrass project. I'll then introduce one of the lead scientists, Manuel, who can then talk through the science in a far better and more eloquent way than I can. And then we will sum up some of the learning we've taken from the project. We'll have a look at next steps, and then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the session. So in its brief format, the Bermuda Seagrass project was an opportunity to be able to restore the habitat on a very small scale around Bermuda, and we looked at the benefits in terms of the environmental benefits, being able to restore seagrass meadows, which is an issue that's not just affecting Bermuda, but actually is quite a global situation. So if you look at the UK itself has actually lost roughly 90% of its seagrass meadows. So this was a fantastic opportunity to actually, on a small scale, have a look, okay, is there a way to be able to restore the habitat that's been destroyed through human interaction and the chain of consequences that have led from that. Again, when Bermuda kind of goes green, there was an opportunity for Bermuda to be able to demonstrate its impact. We can, actually show a government which actually decided to make a difference and a change. And being on a small scale, it's actually relatively easy to start looking at, to monitor it and have a look at the science behind it, to give it some validity and reliability behind this sort of project. There was a great opportunity to then also utilize it as an education exercise. So again, when we look at communities today and we look at our younger generations are huge influences of the older generation. So providing education opportunities for young people to be involved with in a very kind of experiential learning manner was a fantastic opportunity, and it engages with the local community. It makes it far more real and tangible, and when people kind of get empowered by something happening on their doorstep, the likelihood of that project surviving and moving forward in the future is exponentially greater. There are benefits to obviously the tourist industry within Bermuda, which actually helps in terms of the local economy, providing jobs. And then finally, there's an opportunity to really understand the science behind carbon stocks and carbon sinks, the impact of this sort of project, which kind of goes way beyond just the influence in terms of being able to be a carbon reservoir, but looks at biodiversity increase, sustainability, it looks at food security as well. So we were able to look at the wider benefits beyond just a simple project that's looking to kind of take carbon back into the atmosphere. out of the atmosphere back into a nearshore environment, and as we understand the carbon cycle, into the deep sea carbon sinks going forward. So if you move on to the next slide, understanding the issue and the plan. So in its early days, really, the project kind of came about because obviously the seagrass habitat, and understanding Bermuda, it's actually a very small island, extinct volcano just off the coast of America. But the seagrass there have become critically endangered, and due to primarily human interaction with the environment and the consequences of their actions, and how those actions have then led to the basically the destruction and reduction of that seagrass environment. So when we identified the issue, the solution, which Sarah will kind of talk about in far more detail than I will, was, again, on a small scale, was to look at, well, how can we look to protect the seagrass in a environmentally sustainable way? So starting off on a very small scale, we introduced basically 89 cages, which were deployed in several locations around the Bermuda coastline. And whilst it isn't a huge area of land, what it enabled us to do is actually understand whether we can actually have a positive impact and actually turn back the clock, so to speak, and actually restore a habitat that has been slowly destroyed over the years. So 89 cages kind of deployed. The plan is moving forward is with the success of that and with the raising of funding by actually talking about the issue, we were able to engage society as a whole. And this is a fantastic example of when we look at trying to deal with climate change, no one part of society can do it on their own. Every part of society has to come together. And this is a beautiful kind of microcosm of society coming together in terms of, you have human individuals who have the science, you have the Bermuda government who's actually actively engaged, they want to come on board, and you actually have corporate backers coming on as well, who are actually actively engaged in terms of, yes, we can provide the finances and the support to really kind of get this program up and off the ground. And then where we kind of come in, NGOs who also then put their time, and then probably most importantly, volunteers. And when we all come together, we have this perfect opportunity to be able to demonstrate that we can make a difference. And whilst it's a small scale project, I think it's a perfect project to look at and explore and see how we can expand this or similar sort of projects around the world. So without much further ado, it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce Sarah, who will kind of talk you through the science, what they did, and was involved really from the word get-go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. As Justin says, I'm Sarah Manuel, and I'm with the Bermuda Government with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And just to make sure that I have bandwidth while I'm giving this, I'm going to now turn my video off now that you see that I am really here. So as Justin said, our seagrass beds in Bermuda are disappearing at an alarming rate. So I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about what are seagrasses, why are they important, and why are the ones in Bermuda declining, and what we're doing in Bermuda about it. Okay, first of all, just in case you don't know where Bermuda is, we are off the east coast of the US. We're quite isolated, as you can see from the globe here. We're in the North Atlantic. We're not part of the Caribbean. We're well above that. We're a subtropical environment. And over here, you'll see in the center, you'll see the Bermuda platform. And the islands of Bermuda lie on the southeast edge of the Bermuda platform. And we are surrounded by coral reefs. We have mangroves, seagrasses, and a number of other habitats on the Bermuda platform. Yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, and just as Justin said, we are very small. Keep that in mind, please, as we go through. So the island, we only have about 54 square kilometers of island. So now to the seagrasses. The seagrasses in Bermuda, like most places, are, well, all seagrasses are flowering plants, and except they're fully adapted to growing underwater. They have flowers just like the plants that grow on land, and they have pollen, and they reproduce and have seeds. And they can form extensive meadows. in Bermuda, we have 4 species of seagrass: the turtle grass, the manatee grass, the shoal grass, and the paddle grass. The turtle grass is the probably the most robust. It certainly has the largest leaves, the biggest root system. So I just go back a little bit. Seagrasses have they've adapted to growing in the water. They have seagrass blades or leaves that grow and shoots that grow above the sediment. And then underneath, they have these horizontal root systems that, the horizontal stems that provide support for the shoots. And then they have roots that hold the plant in place. And in Bermuda, you can find a seagrass meadow that is solely turtle grass, or you can find one that's a mixture of, generally, you'll get a mixture of up to 3 grasses. We haven't seen any of the meadows with all 4 species in at once, but they do form extensive meadows, as you can see over here on the screen. The pinky peachy color shows where the seagrasses were on the Bermuda platform. So you can see there's quite an extensive bed that used to run down the north shore of the island, and then some more off the southwest of the island. Okay, next slide, please. So why are seagrasses important? They perform a number of services in the marine environment. They are a food source for many animals. The green turtle is probably one of the best known animals that feed on seagrasses, but there are others, including fish, that feed on the seagrass blades. They also, other animals come into the seagrass beds to feed on those animals that feed on the seagrass blades. So as you can see over here on the food web, there's quite a diverse community of animals that live in the seagrass meadows. The seagrass meadows also provide shelter for many animals. Some of them live on the blades of the seagrass, and others of them hide in amongst them. And many of the fish that we eat in Bermuda start their lives in the seagrass or use the seagrass at some point in their life cycle. Seagrasses, you also have numerous other organisms, some of them endangered, such as the seahorses that live in the seagrass. The list goes on. Okay, next slide, please. As you can see, as I was talking about here, you have a cross section through the seagrass where you've got the leaves at the top, and then you've got those horizontal stems called rhizomes, and the roots, and then the sediment underneath. And seagrasses, as they're green flowering plants, they take in carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. So they're bringing in carbon, they use it for food, they store it in their green leaves, they store it in the stems and in the roots and in the sediments below the roots. So this is why they're important to help fight climate change. You can see down here all the stored carbon underneath the seagrass meadow. So if you lose a seagrass meadow, gradually all that stored carbon will erode and enter the atmosphere again. So also through this process of photosynthesis, the plants give off oxygen, which is important to most marine organisms that live in the marine environment. Also through the horizontal stems and roots, the seagrass meadows keep the sand in place, so they help reduce erosion during times of rough weather. And the leaves also act as a water filter. They trap particles and dissolved materials as the water flows through them, and this helps maintain water clarity and purity that lets the coral reefs communities survive. So essentially, seagrasses help maintain healthy conditions for all marine organisms. Okay, next slide, please. So in Bermuda, like most places around the world, our inshore beds have declined due to development. People like to have docks on their properties if they're next to the water. So docks either cover the seagrass bed completely or they shade it. And seagrass is like the grass on your lawn. It needs light to grow. So if it's shaded, it will die off. But boating activities, particularly moorings for boats, everybody who has a boat wants to moor their boat in a sheltered bay, and that's pretty much where seagrasses want to grow as well. And as you can see, the mooring chains drag and they scour the seabed, destroying the seagrass. Also, people who go out in the boat and don't pay attention sometimes run aground and will make a scar through the seagrass bed. But what is different in Bermuda is that, unlike a lot of places in the world, our seagrass meadows are not disappearing due to declining water quality. Our water quality in Bermuda is still good. Hopefully it will remain that way. But as seagrass is one of the things that helps keep the water quality regulated, if we're losing it, it may change. Okay, next. Next, right. Okay, so what is causing our decline? Most recently, and it may be hard for some of you to believe, but green turtles have helped the decline of our seagrasses in most recent years. This is, as you can see these photos, this is a seagrass bed that was offshore, so it's away from man's impacts. There's no, in fact, when I showed you that map earlier, it was the bottom sort of southwest of the Bermuda platform. There's no moorings, there's no runoff or anything in this environment. And when I first started studying this bed in 2007, it was pristine. Turtles were not grazing in this bed. And then gradually over the years, the turtles moved in and started grazing it. And you can see what it looks like. It's really short shoots and sparse seagrass in 2013. And then by 2017, there was absolutely no seagrass whatsoever. And we've seen this it's widespread around Bermuda. And the most likely reason is the green turtles and their grazing. And we have seen an increase in green turtles in our waters. We do not have any nesting beaches in Bermuda, but we have turtles that come to Bermuda, green turtles that come to Bermuda from nesting at beaches around the Caribbean Sea and Florida. And all these nesting beaches are doing very well with their conservation efforts, and they're seeing increases in hatchlings. And as a result, we are seeing more turtles arrive on the Bermuda platform. And they take up residence, and they are here in Bermuda for about 15 years. And then just before they reach puberty, they head off to another area where turtles, they don't go straight from here straight back to their nesting beaches, but they go to an area where pretty much where teenage turtles hang out. So that's why we're most likely seeing an increase of green turtles in our waters. Okay, next slide. And you say, okay, well, turtles and seagrass go together. Yes, they do. But we have an imbalance in our waters. Around Bermuda in the North Atlantic, the main predator of the green turtles has been overfished. And therefore, there are no sharks, particularly tiger sharks, to control the turtle populations around Bermuda. And the sharks also, as well as controlling the number of turtles, they control the amount of time turtles spend feeding on a seagrass bed. So we have no control on the turtles. They see our seagrass beds and they sit there and they eat and eat and eat. And gradually our seagrass beds can't keep up with the amount of grazing and they collapse. And this, unfortunately, with the human pressures that have been detrimental to the seagrass bed, these two in combination have led to the demise of our seagrass beds around Bermuda. Okay. So what we've been doing is we found that if we can put a cage over the top of the seagrass before it has completely gone, that the seagrass will grow back. So if we remove the turtle grazing, the grass under the cage will grow back. So we're creating these, what we're calling refuges for seagrass. The fish can use it, anything else can use it. It's just that the turtles can't graze it completely. And the turtles can graze the tops, so it's still long, and the fish can have shelter, or they can graze around the edges of the cages. And as you can see, we're not taking away all the habitat for the turtles to graze anyway, but we are preserving some of this long grass so that other animals have a habitat to live in. And okay, next slide. And the way we're doing this is we have been extremely lucky in that we had a number of private individuals that were concerned enough about the marine environment to donate material to build the cages. And then we've had, through ClimateWise, we've had a number of companies come on board to support the project. And not only are they providing funding, but they're providing manpower to help build the cages. We've also had students in to help build the cages, and we've been putting them out. And next slide. These are all the locations where we have put cages. We are aiming to cover 2,384 square meters, which is, in the grand scheme of seagrass, is not a huge area, but you do have to remember that Bermuda is very small. And so from this graph, you can see the green is where we've got cages, the red is where we're planning to put cages, and the yellow is, on some sites we have the cages on site, but they need to be put in place. But we are gradually getting very close to our 2,384 square meters. And this just gives you an indication of the bottom picture here of what we're covering. So you've got the insert there shows how this is actually the bed that I showed you earlier. This is what it looks. It does have a little bit of grass there now. This is the offshore bed at Chub Head, and so we've covered this area with seagrass. These are cages that went in last month, and we're hoping that by this time next year we might see a big difference under the cages. And I think it's back over to you, Justin.
Right, just come off unmute. So, as I said at the beginning, the important thing is it shows, and what Sarah's kind of articulated is actually when you come together, you bring the science, government comes on board, and you have private individuals, and you have corporate donations, and you have NGOs kind of all getting involved. You can actually start to make a difference, albeit on a small scale. But the beauty behind this kind of project is very replicable and can kind of be laid out. But the secret is also to demonstrate the wider benefits to society as well. So whilst I've talked about at the beginning, especially with ClimateWise, we like to get involved with projects that have an impact upon either a CO2 reduction or minimize the output of CO2 from particular environments, or actually prevent CO2 release in the first place. We also look to support projects that have ancillary benefits. So, increase in biodiversity, the fact that seagrass meadows actually act as natural kind of erosion, preventing kind of coastal erosion, we looked to try and support projects that have multiple benefits, and then including in that is actually creating sustainability within the local environment, improving the conditions of the local environment, providing employment opportunities within the local environment, or health benefits within the local environment. So we look to try and support projects that have these other ancillary benefits. We don't have to be linear in our thinking we're just focusing on one particular area. We look to focus on one particular area, but look at what are the surrounding benefits. So the next couple of slides, really, we're kind of looking at this in a bit more detail. So immediately, when you're engaging other stakeholders, you need to be able to articulate those benefits to them to really bring them on board. So, when we look at Bermuda's case example here, there's a huge benefit to the tourist industry, as Sarah mentioned, in terms of, it's a beautiful environment and the water is extraordinarily clean, but that's what makes it so attractive to tourists to come there in the first place. And actually having increased biodiversity and protecting those marine resources brings value to the local environment, which then helps to sustain the population within that area in terms of employment opportunities. And actually, as again, I think Sarah mentioned earlier, it provides kind of food security within that local environment, and especially somewhere like Bermuda, the population is very reliant upon external food sources to come in. So the more you can reduce that, the wider the impact is in terms of the CO2 impact upon the supply chain for providing food within a local community. Next slide. So as we mentioned, if you kind of support tourism, then there are also then the wider benefits. So there's the wider benefits for on the economy. So in terms of society itself, there's the restoration of what have been your natural habitat, food security, as I mentioned before. There's also an ability to demonstrate that you can be a industry, or in this case, kind of a global leader. And what we need to do is demonstrate the success stories that encourages other governments to go, yes, we can do the same. And it doesn't have to be punitive in terms of making this change towards a green recovery. There are financial and social and economic benefits to doing this. So that leadership role in society is hugely important. And the more you can influence tourists coming into those areas, those tourists are going to talk about it. And that actually then spreads the word. So society and the kind of government, they kind of really go hand in hand together. And so it has those ancillary benefits for local businesses. The other key area for me, and coming from an educational background, there's a perfect opportunity to look at these projects and understand the science behind it, understand the impacts. Now, understanding the science and collecting the data often takes time, and this is a classic example. In ClimateWise, one of the things we do is we try to facilitate businesses to be able to understand their carbon footprint and then offset that footprint. And in many ways, you then need carbon credited accounts. But a lot of projects we also support don't just look at the carbon accreditation. We know there's a benefit, but we'll do the science to actually work out what that benefit is. Yes, the seagrass itself has a primary benefit in terms of extracting carbon out of the water through photosynthesis, containing it within the nearshore environments, and over time depositing it into deep sea environments. But there are also other benefits, in terms of the biodiversity within that local area and their interaction upon the carbon chain, and as I've mentioned before, the food chain as well as has a huge kind of carbon effect. And then there's also kind of enhanced reputation by getting involved in these projects. As I said before, it's showing that leadership and demonstrating that even small communities can make a difference. Next slide, please. For me, this is one of the key areas, and one of the key areas that I'm heavily involved in. I think I might have mentioned right at the beginning that when you look at the younger generations coming through now, they are the first generations who actively influence the older generation's behaviour. When I was a child, I was influenced by my parents' behaviours. I did what my parents did, effectively. I now have a 10-year-old who basically influences my behaviours. So there's a perfect opportunity to really involve people in terms of the educational benefits. And if we start and engage people at a young age, and young people are kind of being exposed to climate change, and there's a fear there, which is understandable, but I think it's also really paramount for us to be able to demonstrate there are solutions to this, but we all have to play that part. So education becomes extraordinarily important, which is why actually, again, when we looked at this project itself, coming together as a community to work together as a community was highly important. So obviously we have support from CLGP and PwC, Bermuda Government, but also there are other NGOs who provide that opportunity to spread the message and develop awareness. And as I mentioned before, one of the key areas to really drive home learning and understanding is that through that experiential education, that learning. So if we can get projects up and running on a local scale, you're going to get that local buy-in, which is hugely important, because once you have that engagement and that buy-in and people feel involved and part of the process, there's that sense of ownership, that project is far more likely to succeed in the short term, but also in the long term. You get that sense of sustainability, which is hugely important. And there's a real kind of opportunity to as I said, engage these young people and take them on the journey, and for them to be the next generation of people coming through saying, yes, we can do this, we can do that, here's another opportunity, I want to get involved, I can make a difference. So it's the lovely thing about this is that it's not just kind of young students kind of coming through, but I think when we're looking at the Bermuda Seagrass project, and I'd be saying this about any project, there's also an opportunity for people who are doing their degrees or postgrads to get involved in sort of stuff and collect the science for us, because through the science we can then influence the decision makers. Next slide, please. So as mentioned before, with all these kind of projects, and it's really about kind of understanding and bring the stakeholders together. And when you kind of get everyone coming together, you have that perfect opportunity, I think, to then really make a difference, because everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction. But this is, where governance really becomes very important as well. And you have to understand what it is that each partner kind of wants and needs from a project, and be able to articulate it, and then make sure that we deliver those kind of KPIs. So whether it be WaterStart, which is again a not-for-profit, but let's engage young students and developing their skills and provide kind of learning opportunities. People like our organisation, Climate-Wise, where we kind of help facilitate funds and bring these different bodies together to actually try and get these projects off the ground. You need that holistic approach surrounding it, I think, to have the best chance for something to succeed. And whilst this is a small scale, there's no reason why this shouldn't be ramped up onto larger scales in different locations around the world. Next slide, please. So when we look at this, how have we actually executed this? And I said this is where Stephen would have been ideal to kind of talk you through it, because he was involved on the ground, and unfortunately I'm several thousand miles away in a far colder country, much to my annoyance. But the idea is understanding what the benefits were to the environment, the community, sending that message to local businesses. How does, from our point of view, how does seagrass act as a carbon sink, and what does this look in terms of a local scale, but also the bigger picture? And when we kind of come together with our partners, how we can then get them to understand, actually, this is the impact your company or you as an individual may have, but we can make a difference, and we can actually do things actually having a meaningful impact. Yes, we're looking to sequester carbon, but there's also the other environmental benefits. As I said before, this increased biodiversity, which is hugely important, because as most people will know, we are now entering, or we are well into, we're not entering anymore, another mass extinction event. And it's going to be the first mass extinction event really, which has been caused by human behavior. But we need to kind of change that direction, and we can reset in places. The more times we reset, the more we're going to kind of save. So kind of bringing people together, understanding what it is every stakeholder needs, and then really ensuring that you actually have good governance. Good governance is hugely important in these situations, because you do have multiple stakeholders who, obviously do have slightly different kind of desires and wants. But by having good governance, having a clear kind of concise plan, actually setting some very kind of key KPIs that you can kind of hold yourselves to, and then being able to report it, transparently and openly. So, again, what we do is we look to try and report on all our projects on a quarterly basis. Everybody's been involved, from PwC, CLGP, BFNM. They kind of receive feedback on the project, so they know where their funding is going and the impact it's having. And that brings that sense of ownership, that they're seeing the linkage between private funding, government application, and companies all partnering together, and they start to see the impact, and that's hugely beneficial. And I said it before, it brings everybody along, and you find that companies, whilst there's been they want to offset, but some companies actually, they want to go beyond. They actually want to actually make a difference and actually getting particular projects up and off the ground rather than just offsetting their footprints. There'll be companies who are really interested in actually getting new projects off the ground. They're not worried about what the carbon sequestration is. They're looking at the bigger picture. So this is a really nice kind of case study where we can look at this, and you know, anybody who's on this talk today can actually have those conversations with other people as well. So what next? I said this is kind of, you know, we're at early stages. As Sarah kind of mentioned, we are looking to expand the seagrass regeneration project in Bermuda. You know, as Sarah mentioned, we're not far off the 2,300 plus meters. But the next steps will be actually collecting the data, looking at the impact, collecting the science, looking at the viability of expanding this to other locations. And while Sarah kind of mentioned there'll be different reasons why there's been seagrass degeneration in particular coastal environments, there will be some underlying causes which are the same. And more often than not, it's going to be human behavior within that local environment. So we can start to understand that and apply that science to other locations to work. Okay, we have a better understanding here. Let's get people back on board. Let's make a difference. Let's involve our corporate partners, local NGOs, local governments. You know, it can be a local government on the UK scale or national governments, and let's do it again and see where we go from there. And it's only when we all come together, I think, we start to move the needle and we can actually make a difference. If we rely on one particular part of society to do it for us, I think more often than not, we're going to end up disappointed. And you know, I'm kind of going to finish on this quote before we kind of move into Q&As, really. But I think it's pertinent now more than ever from Barack Obama. You know, someday our children and our children's children will look at us in the eye, and they'll look us in the eye, and they'll ask us, did we do all that we could when we had the chance to deal with this problem and leave them a cleaner, safer, more stable world? Yeah. I want to be able to say yes. I want to be able to look at my 10-year-old and say yes. And hopefully my 10-year-old has children for himself. And I would be able to say to my grandchildren, I did everything that I could. And I looked to engage with everybody I could and bring everybody along. So I will leave the kind of presentation of the Bermuda Seagrass project there, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity now for people to kind of ask any questions. Hopefully of Sarah, because she'll hopefully have the scientific answers. But if there are any other questions which I can answer as well, please go ahead.
Hi guys, thanks very much for a really interesting talk. I had a quick question, just in terms of, obviously you're in sort of fairly early stages in your project. Is there any kind of existing information in terms of how, you know, like how much carbon seagrass can capture and how that compares to other carbon sequestration?
In Bermuda, we haven't really, we're just starting out. So we will be measuring this as we go along, but we don't know the answer, no.
Thanks.
We can only use the information that we have from the same species in other places, but every environment is different.
Yeah. And is there any sort of, you know, like averaging over different environments that gives a kind of clue, or?
I mean, we can use information from Florida. That's probably our closest to get that work. Give a rough estimate, but off the top of my head, I don't know what those figures are.
It's a really interesting question, actually, Anna, because you see it with people when they're talking about tree planting, which is great. I have nothing against tree planting at all if it's done in the right environment and it doesn't have a detrimental effect to that habitat. But depending on where you plant in the world and the species of the tree has a huge impact in terms of that carbon sequestration. And quite often you'll find actually you don't get the carbon benefits until way down the line. And there'll be certain trees in certain environments, in tropical environments, which are probably more beneficial than the environments which kind of moved towards the northern kind of regions. But I think when you look at some of the generic research out there, and I believe Swansea University and it could be Portsmouth, but I could be wrong on that one. There's evidence to suggest that seagrass can be anywhere between 4 to 8 times more effective at sequestering CO2 than trees. But it's trying to apply, it's trying to measure apples versus oranges, I'm guessing here.
Yeah, and I guess that's quite difficult in terms of, like trying to put a value on these programs, especially, like when it comes to offsetting and being able to sell them, which I guess is why you take this sort of, multi-pronged approach of, like promoting the benefits in the whole rather than a sort of offsetting approach.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think for the, from our point of view, where we engage with companies and that company wants to be able to demonstrate that they've got an offset footprint, then we have to go through our kind of the carbon protocol. So we use the gold standard or sort of you endorse projects, and we have a very clear understanding of what that impact is in terms of any particular project. But we want to go beyond that because it's quite restrictive and you can wait a long time and people might not engage because, oh, there's no science behind it. So you've got to look at the bigger picture. We know it has an impact, but let's look at the overall picture. Can we invest in projects that do more than what they say on the tin, so to speak? And we'll get the science, but we shouldn't preclude us from trying to do it in the first place.
I saw that Susanna had her hand raised.
Hi, yeah, I've got a question that's fairly similar. Kind of in terms of this case study specifically, you mentioned a few different species of seagrass, and I guess I was just wondering which one you would choose preferentially, which one might be better at carbon sequestration?
It would definitely be the turtle grass. It has a much bigger structure, like the horizontal stems, the rhizomes, are much thicker and they're going to store more carbon. And that cross section I showed you, that was the turtle grass, so you can see how much below ground material there is stored under that, whereas you don't see it quite so much with the other species.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I actually have a question for you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of look at news reports around the world, and we're seeing the impact of warming seas on coral reefs, are there some similar impacts in terms of seagrass, in terms of changing sea temperatures, or is it a bit more robust in that respect, or is it solely dependent upon the light quality entering the kind of water platform and what's happening above it in terms of shade?
I think light is a huge factor, but temperature, obviously, certain seagrasses only grow in certain places because the water temperature is suitable. The turtle grass that we have here is a tropical species, and it's at the northern end of its range in Bermuda. So I would think with the temperatures getting a little bit warmer, that as it's happening slowly over time, the turtle grass here might actually do better. But if sea level rises, then it has more water on top of it, so it's shaded more, because obviously, like turtle grass only grows in Bermuda, it only grows to about a water depth of 30 feet, because at that limit it doesn't get enough light at greater depths than 30 feet. So if you've got deeper water, that's going to affect. So there's a whole bunch of things that could counteract the warming temperature. Did that make sense?
That did make sense, thank you. Are there any other questions? I can't see whether hands have come up or not.
I think Linda had put a question in the chat, which is sort of interesting about further opportunities in the UK.
In terms of seagrass opportunities or kind of carbon sequestration projects in general? It's I'm just reading the chat now, actually. West Wales, going on with the volunteers. I don't think there's much happening. So it's interesting. We are reaching out to Swansea University as well, because I know that they're doing some research in this area within kind of UK seabeds, and I believe there's actually a seagrass replantation exercise going on the coast of Wales somewhere. I'm not quite sure where, but it's certainly one of the areas that we want to explore at Climate-Wise. So I said we're reaching out, and we're reaching out to other university providers to see whether we can actually do the same kind of process in the UK that we've done in Bermuda. and actually bring a again, this holistic approach, trying to bring local communities on board with the education and science, and with hopefully some corporate donors to actually explore that. So for me, that's a really exciting opportunity in the area to try and develop, and it's really, really important to try and develop some local projects as well. Yes, global projects are important, and we support global projects obviously around the world, but to kind of get some buy-in on a local community, local level, is really, really important, especially when you're looking to kind of raise money and funds. And there, as I said before, there is this huge opportunity because over 90% of the seagrass meadows around the UK have disappeared. And if we want to protect our marine biodiversity and take on board what Sarah said in terms of seagrass meadows act as a, for want of a better word, a filtration system to improve our water quality, then that becomes hugely important. So whilst there's not a lot happening, I believe there are a couple of universities who are getting involved, and it's something that we want to get involved and explore, hopefully as an opportunity within the UK. Hopefully that's answered some of that question. Any further ones? Well, if that's it, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Sarah. She's obviously dialing in from Bermuda, and actually kind of getting the insight and science is absolutely fantastic. There's an opportunity to kind of really make a difference and think about yourselves and your actions at a local level. Please kind of try and share this message through any of our platforms, whether that be LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or our YouTube channel. If there's a particular project that you think that you want to get involved with, that might be of interest, if we can help facilitate that, we're more than happy to kind of come in and have those conversations and help try and raise some funding. The important thing really is, as I said before, and I can't overemphasize this, is coming together as a community, as a society, and you're going to need all elements of that society to really succeed. And when you have those conversations with the big corporates, more often than not, you find that they're really engaged and they're really happy to kind of come on board, and they want to be seen to be making a difference. So, the conversations we have with PwC, SailGP, who, they're obviously trying to take this message around seagrass meadows around the world for over their Sail. The insurance company in Bermuda will also be involved. They provide finance, but they've also provided, as Sarah mentioned, the human power as well, the people to and the volunteers putting that sort of stuff together, and you get individual donors who are willing to contribute. And before you know it, you have enough funds really to get things moving, and you can start to make a difference. And look at on a local level. And if you can get that structure governance in place and have success at local level, well, then you can expand it. We feel at ClimateWise we've got this basic model that everybody can really kind of follow. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be expanded and replicated. And the more people can do it, the better. So again, thank you for everyone turning up today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sorry my colleague Stephen couldn't sign in. He's far more articulate on this sector than I am. But it's an absolutely wonderful opportunity to have Sarah on board. And again, thank you so much. Stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Kat, for organising it and getting this all up and running on the technology front.
Thank you, Justin.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.